Morning, Gary. I'm going to address this video directly to you, Gary, because in the video I made yesterday I tried your technique where you refer to the person in the third person, where you say he did this or he thinks that or he is that. It felt pretty uncomfortable and rude doing it, and quite honestly it sounds uncomfortable and sounds rude when you do it, but I'm going to go back to the direct address thing because I think it's easier. Yeah, a couple of housekeeping things first on that. Firstly, you got me banged to rights on the Soylent Green reference. Yeah, you're right, I'd mixed it up with some other book or some other film or something. In Soylent Green, humans are not bred as a protein source. They are recycled, but just out of a matter of convenience, I guess. So you're right there. Yeah, you're probably right about VR. At some point in the future, or now even, VR isn't particularly visibly pixelated. High definition VR, yeah. And would probably be better than Second Life. You're probably right there. Yeah, this thing at the end. Yeah, sorry that I found this a bit surprising, but perhaps I shouldn't have done. This thing at the end there, I made this reference in my video to men who walk around talking to themselves, by themselves. Now clearly you've taken this as a serious insult and a slight on your character, Gary. But I know you're familiar with this, so this is why it's a bit surprising. But I've made over 1,000 videos now, most of which involve me walking around by myself, talking to myself, and I do spend quite a lot of time by myself as well. So, whilst it might have appeared to be an insult, Gary, I was really putting myself in that grand tradition that you yourself occupy, along with Martin Heidegger, along with Pentti Linkola, along with Ted Kaczynski, and along with, what's he called? Paul Theroux? No, it's not Paul Theroux, is it? The guy who wrote Walden, anyway. So yeah, if you took it as an insult, well, that's a bit of a shame, really. It was actually, for me, a small moment of shared eccentricity. Anyway, back to the content of your video, Gary. Yeah, I just want to set the context up to this first, because I think it is quite important. I mean, don't forget, this series of videos that I've made, and I've made about 10 now in this series, about loosely framed around overpopulation and elephants. This whole series was initiated by your critical comments about some of my videos. I was just bimbling through the woods, warbling on about psychology and walking on about emotions and warbling on about the things that I talk about, because they're the things that I'm interested in. And you came to my channel, Gary, and said that I'm ignoring these things, and that I'm, and expressing your dissatisfaction with the triviality of the things that I talk about. And and say, let's talk about, let's address the elephant in the room. Okay, Gary, I'm addressing the elephant in the room, and I'm sorry I'm not addressing it in exactly the way that you do, I'd have a disagreement. I disagree with you. I think you're wrong in some of these things. And clearly you think I'm wrong in some things. I personally favour an approach which looks at end of life rather than beginning of life. I favour an approach which doesn't demand totalitarian systems to implement. I favour an approach which is, broadly speaking, in keeping with a development of increasing liberalisation, not its opposite. And again, as I've said several times in these videos, an approach in which the means to an end aren't worse than the ends themselves. There's no point, as you yourself had said actually in one of these videos, Gary. You'd said, first do no harm. There was this coincidental moment where you'd said that phrase at the same time as I'd made a video with that title, First Do No Harm. And that seems like a really important moral stance to take in relation to political change. And I firmly believe that if you're going to try to institute the kind of political policies that you're talking about, it would be the kind of infrastructure you need to put in place would make living in that society far worse than living in this society. And as I've said before, I would much favour a more voluntary approach, or finding ways to incentivise behaviours rather than penalise them. What else? Yeah, you talked about eugenics. You said I made a few videos about eugenics. I haven't made any videos about eugenics. I made a few about suicides, and I actually didn't say eugenics. You said euthanasia. That's right. But I'm not in support. At no point have I said I would support involuntary euthanasia. That's kind of what 2B Serious was hinting at as well, which is why I didn't really go there. No, no, voluntary euthanasia, of course. I'm absolutely in support of that, as I've said before, with proper checks and balances being in place. So yeah, but not other kinds of euthanasia. So I haven't really been interested in that. And as I said before, my version of voluntary euthanasia is one that simply isn't viable right now, because it doesn't. Well, yeah, it'd take too long to go there, wouldn't it? Yeah, so there's that, I suppose, really. Let's just go back to this voucher scheme for a minute. I mean, it's not that I didn't address that, Gary. I mean, what you're kind of neglecting here is that I did talk about that. I did cite China. There has been attempts to do exactly what you're suggesting here. China did try to do that. And even with all the backing of a massive infrastructure and a massive totalitarian state, and even with the putting into place of a system of finance which would allow proper circulation of wealth and proper distribution of wealth, supposedly, and power, even with all of the conditions being optimal for that, it still didn't work. And you're suggesting that you try to do that within the context of a democracy. I mean, there's a reason why people like Ted Kaczynski and why people like Pentti Linkola are fringe elements. It's because nobody likes the idea. Nobody buys it. They really don't. There's a tiny proportion of people which are worried by it, but certainly not worried enough to vote for these people. So, I'm sorry, but democracy is never going to buy that system. So the only thing you'd have to do is the imposition of a police state, and then, as I say, the ends simply wouldn't justify the means, because you'd be doing too much harm first. Alright. As for the other thing, yeah, you suspect that I'm what's the word you use again? Phantasmagorical. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm calling these, my speculations, science fiction. But I have to say again, you know what I mean? I know you throw this word phantasmagorical around as an insult, and refer it to unicorns and so on, but I do think that your voucher scheme, I'm sorry, it is a phantasmagorical scheme. Any scheme which is supposed to solve the problems of the world in ways which are unrealisable or which are mythical, whether that be pink unicorns or whether that be completely unimplementable social policies, are essentially, the same thing. They're just the ramblings of an incontinent imagination, whether it be yours or whether it be any of the various mystical people, or mine, you know what I mean? It's just, we're just using our imaginations here, and I don't think, and it's equally phantasmagorical, I'm sorry, I think that's what I think. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Gary, the most disappointing thing about your video was the bit about VR. And there's no real easy way to say this, but I did find it really deeply disappointing. Because what that showed to me, because in many of your videos, and I really enjoy your videos, I really do. In many of your videos, you talk about, this is a zero-sum game, and we should come out of the game. We should, the game is broken, it's unfair. These are the kind of language you use, and it's all about, it seems to me, either breaking the game, changing the human game, rewriting the rules of the human game, throwing the rule book out the window. That's the whole position that's the whole set of ideas you've been adopting, that this game is fucked, or it's rigged, or it's a bad game to start with, and we need to rewrite the game. But your description of your ambitions for VR, and I know you would just talk off the top of your head, the Superman, Lois Lane fantasy, but in this most recent response, the being a quarterback, or having all those kinds of material and embodied successes. I mean, what that's revealing to me is you don't want to break the game at all. You just want to win it. You want to win it, and okay, you want everybody else to have the opportunity to win it as well. But many of us aren't interested in winning that kind of a game. Really, you know what I mean? And quite honestly, there are ways to win the game. You don't need to go into virtual reality to win it. You just need to be in the world. Now, okay, I accept the fact it isn't a level playing field. I know that. But people are out there in the world sleeping with Lois Lane lookalikes and being quarterbacks and being success stories. People are doing that game. And the fact that you or I or Ted Kaczynski or anybody else are not doing those things isn't I don't know, just buying into VR so that because you or I or anybody else feels a failure, and we want to succeed, and the only way we can succeed is by and gaining the material wealth and the pleasures of the flesh. The only way we can do that is by cheating and doing it in virtual reality. And not any old virtual reality, not really playing against decent competitors, but virtual reality with it turned down to novice mode. Tony Hawk with moon gravity. You know, anybody can do tricks in there. You know, it sounds like hell to me. I'm sorry, it sounds like hell. And it sounds like a tiny, tiny, tiny imagination. That's what it sounds like to me. No. Anyway, nice talking to you, Gary.